And we're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the virtual writing retreat, Renaissance Festival Fair, whatever it is. I don't know. I don't know. We're all here. That's all that matters is that you're here. I'm here. Charlie's here. Natalie will be here soon. Yes, Charlie is in crushed velvet the way she is meant to be. I'm just saying. I just feel like now I've been challenged and I'm going to have to show you something in crushed velvet. I assume you love purple too. I'm just right.
I have to. The hubby would divorce me if I did.
Okay. Because I envisioned you in crushed velvet. Anyway, on the topic. Okay, so we are here to talk about world building, specifically the part of world building using food, medicine, and magic, because there's no way to talk about medieval and Renaissance and Tudor, anywhere that European time period, and not talk. If you're talking about food and medicine, you have to talk about magic and religion, because there is no way to extract these subjects from each other. They are intertwined. They cannot be removed. So that's what we're here for. Anyway, Charlie, would you like to do an intro, because I am not good at this?
Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie. I write under the name of C.E. Dorset. I do way too much. I do streams on my channel every Wednesday and Friday, and I do a bunch of podcasts. The ones that you all would probably be most interested in is my podcast Myth Weaving, where I talk about world building, writing, and the like. There is 27 episodes over there already. Deep dives into every aspect of world building and things that you can do. It should be on every podcast provider, and if it is not, they lied to me, please tell me. And so I can go yell at them and fix that. But yeah, hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Should we quickly go and see who's here?
If you want.
You know what? I just like it. I just like going the hi, the extroverted thing. Okay. Devin is here. Hello, sweetheart.
Hey, Devin.
Right, and then Megan. Hello, darling. And MM Ward, hey, babe. And CB made it. Hey, hello. Let's see.
I feel like I'm just sitting here going, these are not the droids you're looking for.
Yeah, I feel
like not the droids you're looking
for. Hello. Yes. And then Tom is here. Hey, babe. That is my brother. Don't listen to him. Let me see. Okay, I think that's everybody who's here right now. Yeah, I really hope everyone can read the chat, because there's some interesting conversations going on, and we're all missing out if we don't enjoy pasta that might be tentacles. I mean, who hasn't had that happen? Megan has given me a very helpful reminder. Please, if you enjoy this, if you'd like to support our work, please hit the like button so other people can see it in their recommendations.
Hello, Heather.
Think about maybe subscribing. Let's see.
Everybody likes a good subscription.
Just throwing that out there as something
free. It's not like we have over 1,000 people and have that secret join button down there. I mean, for goodness sakes.
I mean, honestly, I'll be honest with you. My goal right now is to get 100 subscribers, just so I can get the vanity channel. Earl, that's what I want. That's all I want for Christmas, y'all.
When I completely off topic, but when I hit 100 subscribers, YouTube dead named me for 3 weeks, and I don't know why. It just suddenly decided, and dead named me for 2 weeks.
Whoa.
It just decided what my vanity URL should be. And I'm like, oh, no, not that. No. And it's you can only change this once every 6 months. And I'm like, but I didn't change it. You did this.
Oh, that's messed up. Oh, yeah. Gosh.
So beware. Just beware.
Yeah, I don't know what it will be, but we'll find out. Maybe I'll have a little surprise for Christmas. Let's see. Oh, Heather's here. There. Hi, Heather. How's it going? All right, let's see. Oh, the Queen's Wave. Yes, we have the Queen's Wave. So, and there is Natalie with Hello, Sock Puppet.
You warned me,
Hi.
and still, Oh.
How are you?
I can't even.
I love your hair.
Quite well.
I just can't.
Well, this is the best I could do.
I love it. What are you talking about? Criticism. Screw those people. It looks great. Are those eyelashes?
They're extensions, but thank you for calling me out on my
is this sort of a drag? Is this a drag show sort of? Saying a lot? I tried to go for natural.
Honey, I didn't know I was supposed to beat my face before we got here. Let's go.
Now I want to add some blush so bad.
I am wearing blush.
Oh dear. Well, what can I say? Maybe we're in the library. Anyway. Okay.
Don't make me start reading people. It will get intense.
Oh, speaking of which, that does remind me. I was wondering if anyone else had noticed that it seems like lately in our village, our kingdom, there's been a lot of people in the skies. I don't know what that's about. Has anybody else noticed this? Maybe? A little bit? I'm kind of wondering what's going on. Surely it can't be a fancy dress party that I have not been invited to as the innkeeper. And I'm available for all of your ailments.
Scandal and agog.
Tanya is here.
By the way, for anyone visiting my inn, we do have ladies of negotiable affection. They are over there by the fire. Charlie, every time you could have it, you throw it. They're by the fire, and I just want to point out, just for those discerning clientele who may not know, it is when negotiating affections, it's very helpful to buy a lady a meal. Just throwing that out there. We have stew. It's lovely.
I just heard my great aunt shouting, "Lady in red makes her living in the bed," and I looked down and realized I'm wearing red, and I was like, I can't be here for this.
I mean, sweetheart,
I'm being shamed.
A girl's got to make a living.
Yes.
Right? You do what you have to do, and also to keep you off the streets, right? That's what we have the fireplace for.
And this is actually a very important thing. Like when we're talking about food and magic, like the reason you wanted to bring those together is because remember, brewing was considered a form of magic back in the day because you were bringing life to a fluid. And early on, most brewers were women.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Until people realized, oh wait, there's money in it.
Yes, pretty much. That's at the point that women got kicked out. I mean, like feminism.
But this is one of the reasons why the stereotypes that we have of the witch are very. If you notice, they're very culinary based. They are brewing. They're constantly brewing because women were making a lot of the beer and stuff that was required for society. Yes, for society to go on. And so every house had their own recipe, and houses started to become known for the quality of their brews and would start selling it to make a little bit extra. You have the midwives who were basically the only real doctors for a really long time in Europe until, of course, oh, wait, there's money in it. And that became a profession as well. And these things, which were already seen as being on the border of magic already, oh, no, that's witchcraft. And this to me is why I don't like the science versus magic dichotomy that is in a lot of fiction, because the origins of that are based in this early movement to push women out of cooking, out of brewing, so that could become a more male-dominated field once the money was there, and to push women out of medicine when the doctor class arose.
Preach it.
And so I am really here on behalf of my magic panel, which will be tomorrow, to bring up this whole thing that magic and culinary arts are intimately intertwined and have been historically. So always bear that in mind with everything that you're doing, because the people that are shamed, the people that have that cultural stigma to them, a lot of that was because of money. Because money and magic have always had an interesting relationship.
Yes,
Money
as well
talks.
as like everybody was practicing magic to varying degrees.
Yes.
At every meal, magic was practiced. And it was part of, I mean, like, they felt they were practicing Catholicism, Christianity, however you want to call it, depending on your own cultural background. But we, as you know, in the 21st century would say, oh, this looks like they're thinking it's magic or they're acting like it's magic. But there was no difference at the time between like practicing your religion and practicing magic. Everything was imbued with good and evil. Yep. And you were always trying to imbue yourself with more of the kind of spiritual magic to keep you strong, to improve your health, to give you strength and energy, and also to keep you on the right path.
Yep.
So there's no way to extract it. And that brings us to all I have planned for this today, which is to vent about all the things that drive me nuts about fantasy writing. Because they try, like, I guess it's because a lot of modern people are not very religious. Mm-hmm. They then put in their world that in this fantasy world that's based on medieval Europe or the Dark Ages of Europe, or which were not actually dark, but anyway, I just want to go into that. But they want to put in there that, like only like the church practiced religion and / magic, and that no one else did, versus no, every single person ever was constantly practicing magic and medicine. Everybody was generalized. There was no specializing or hardly any specializing in this world. Everybody would show up for the haymaking because you got to bring it in. Even the monks and the priests were socially expected to show up and at least bless everything and provide, a sort of spiritual protection. They were meant to protect against storms coming that day, and on and on. It goes on. Yep. I don't mean to like drone, but it drives me freaking nuts. So there. I do, by the way, have created a Telegram group. If anybody is interested in my research on medieval, Dark Ages, Renaissance, and Tudor time periods for your own writing, or if you're just plain old curious, which I will post a link in the chat while Charlie and Natalie talk.
For anybody who's actually interested in the topic that Glory was just talking about, I wanted to show the cover. That's what I was doing. My phone is pulling up the cover of the book. There is a wonderful book by Josephson Storm called The Myth of Disenchantment, which is all about this very postmodern concept that there is a distinction between magic, spirituality, religion, and science, and how superstition and the actions that people partake in continue regardless. And the whole point of this book, which is actually a textbook, so it's not a cheap book. Like if you go for a religion degree, this is one of the books.
So it's dry.
Actually, no, it's really interesting. It's put out by a textbook company, so I think it's like $20 for the ebook.
That's a really good price. I have to be honest, for any textbook in the 21st century.
Well, I'm just saying.
I can't believe what I've paid $250 for a textbook.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's not a $2 book on Amazon. But it's really interesting because it goes through and actually looks at belief in, herbs, crystals, the various things, energy healing, all of this. And the main point of it is that those have not gone away. Religiosity, the idea of going to a building to practice a particular faith, may have gone away in a lot of cultures, but there is a base human instinct that has remained where people are still using their herbs for things. They're still using their crystals for healing. And it's not even about whether or not it's true or not. It's just that this dichotomy that we have built up is part of a legend that we build around about the modern era, that there is this distinction between science, medicine, faith, spirituality, religion, magic, that these are separate things. And the real point and purpose of the book is to understand, no, people are complicated. People are really complicated. Sir Isaac Newton was an alchemist. He was out there discovering calculus, but also trying to turn lead into gold. You know what I'm saying? And doing astrology charts for people. the world is a lot messier than people give it credit for being. Mm-hmm. And the nice thing about this book is, being a scholarly text, it comes with receipts. It has the data to back up all of the different points. So, there are a lot of
bad fingers out snap.
Oh, thank you. Oh, well, with your lips.
You might not think of it that way, but folk remedies are magic. Back in the day, those would have been referred to as tinctures or potions or things of that nature, and they're something that everyone in the community would have had access to, if not the knowledge of how to make it, because they're using their mother, grandmother's recipe that has been passed down for generations, or there would be definitely an apothecary that they could go and get access to it, because magic, it's been just endemic in society since there has been society.
Well, and every household had a physic garden.
Yep.
Everybody. Yep. And if they weren't growing that particular herb that a person needed, well, so-and-so down the road or over in the next village, if it really was important.
Or you could go down to the church.
Or you could go down to the church, to their physic garden, to the monastery.
Where the hospital was.
And you could get some of their herb. And while I'm speaking of that, I do have in the Telegram group a PDF of, it's an abbreviated version of Gerald's herbology. The leaves from Gerald's Herbal, because the original is, number one, written in a difficult to read English, in Middle English, and number two, it's 2,100 plus pages. And this is like slightly under 400 pages, but it does have the pharmacopoeia. It does have with plenty of the drawings of the plants, what they look like, and descriptions. You're killing me.
Totally, that was amazing. That was magic.
She's like, I've been planning this for hours, days.
My arm was
it is there for download for free in the Telegram group.
Yes. You have so much more respect for Jim Henson now, don't you?
Okay. I'm surprised this hasn't come off yet, but
looks
okay.
good.
Plus, I'm eating.
This
is darker for the evening than earlier.
Okay, that's
what, continue.
Yeah. So anyhow, that book is there. Why pay when you could just download the PDF? As I'm just saying, if you're researching, it's easier. Because if you do want to mention an herb as part of your story, there you go. Just Google, just search within the PDF for anything, any kind of disease, although it does help if you know what dropsy is.
And a couple things about herbs and stuff. Every culture has its own understanding of the sympathetic magic uses of herbs. So just to back up and make sure that everybody's on the same table, sympathetic magic is that these two things are alike. So if I do something with one of them, it will affect the other. It's one of the most basic forms of magic that's practiced in virtually every culture on Earth. And the tables of what things sympathetically interact with do vary from culture to culture. So please do not buy into here's the end-all be-all list of amethyst always means this, or this particular, Wolfsbane has 3,000 names because every culture had and every village in England had a different association for what that was. Is it monkshood? Is it Wolfsbane? That's why it has 1,000 names, because they named it according to their use for it. But if you want it to correlate, find the culture that you want to zoom in on and do those connect and look at their connections, because it's not always what you think. In ancient China, it was not uncommon for the nobles to drink solutions made of ground jade, mm-hmm. because they believed it would give them longevity. They would basically make jade teas to serve to rich noble people. In Europe, unfortunately, they did that with mercury, which had worse effects.
Don't forget money.
It could have had the opposite
side effects.
But that was because mercury, because it was a fluid metal, was seen as just naturally magical in Europe, whereas jade had a much more significant connotation to the people in Mercury in China was actually seen as a protective ward, and was often things would be encased in pools of mercury to keep them safe. So treasures would often be put in sealed containers that would then be filled with mercury because they saw it as a protective thing instead. And that's just how one substance is different from culture to culture. So please, I see them on the internet so often, and I love my Wiccan sisters and brothers and non-binary pals, but just because Gerald Gardner said it's a way, that is maybe true for your practice and for your tradition, but that does have a lot of variance from culture to culture.
Yeah, so, I mean, Egyptians were using all of these for very different purposes.
Yes.
As well as, I mean, they were using ground up mummy remains for, you name it, toothpaste, incantations, stucco. So, I mean, I'm not even kidding.
No.
I would like to point out there is, if you've ever just been curious about, historical past periods, I do actually recommend the live action version of Horrible Histories. It is a fun show, but it is actually accurate.
There's actually an easy way to demonstrate how true that is. The actual word for a mummy in Kemetic Egyptian is sa. It is a sa. And you see this word in use until the late classical period, when people started using a substance known as momia, which is actually Greek for wax. But momia was wax derived from grinding up a sa. And the two words got switched because the usefulness of the sa to get the momia, we now call them mummies.
Yeah.
Like, we forgot the actual word that they were originally called. We switched it because the ground material that was made from them was considered such a valuable thing. Like, it's not a joke that they were used that much. Like, you actually you basically call them ground people dust. That's what everything you say, mummy.
I was really shocked when they found, so many mummies this year. Of like, were they any left? I mean, it was a serious industry for several hundred, maybe 1,000 or so years, like a solid time period where everybody's house was even used. They used it in construction. And I'm like, did they have any left? But yeah, that's another thing altogether. Charlie, do you have any pet peeves about historical or fantasy writing you would like to share?
I have a lot.
What? I'm so shocked.
Like I said, from the start, the biggest one is the dichotomy that people don't between science and magic. I don't like it. I see its usefulness because it plays into some modern and postmodern cultural arguments that people want to have, but it is an ahistorical argument that is, I find, extremely problematic. Remember, the people that advanced science were predominantly religious people, and it to try to weave them out, like,
so you
had people on both sides. Like, this is what the people you could be both sides.
We're almost trying to exclude common people, peasants, serfs, however you want to terminology, from practicing, the more elitist version of magic, science, because for the longest time, I mean, let's be honest, look at the point when they're creating electricity, but still not understanding how they were making it. That's magic. That's not yet science.
Egyptians used capacitors at the entrances to temples to shock people when they entered so that they knew that they were entering the presence of a god. They would build gold capacitors. They didn't know that they were capacitors. They just knew that when they built these magic arcs, people would get struck by lightning when they went in, and they knew that they were in the presence of a god.
I mean, can I just be honest? I would totally go to that haunted house. I just have to say, like, I would. I mean, if it starts with a little like light jolt, I'm like, ooh, we're gonna have a good time today.
And yes, getting
my money's worth.
Blessed Saint Hildegard of Bingen. If you are interested in actually knowing how a lot of this actually worked in the Middle Ages, she is, like, luckily becoming a much more known figure in history, but she is the person that the Middle Ages turned on. She was seen as a living prophet. She was recognized by the Catholic Church while she was alive as a prophet. someone who spoke directly to God.
Mhm.
Popes wrote letters to her asking advice. Saint Bernard of Clairvaux wrote letters to her asking her advice, like, should we start this thing called the Templars? And she said no. And he should have listened, but he didn't. She was a very important and very
If only they
figure.
stuck to that. Anyway.
But she wrote one of the first true medical texts in history. I mean, we know we can go back to Galen and some of his stuff, but Galen thought that a woman's womb literally moved around her body and caused her to go crazy. So, you know,
mean,
but
technically we can't do that. But anyway, that's oh, science is wild.
Science is wild. But Hildegard wrote a treatise that I believe it was called Vitae Mundi, I believe. And if you know, she wrote so many, but I think Vitae Mundi was the one that she wrote on actual plants, which means life of the world. People have started going back and looking. Like she was telling people to use aspirin before we knew that there was aspirin. Like she actually not just like used the bark of the tree, but a distillation process to make it into a fine white powder that can then be absorbed under the tongue. Or like she was literally telling people how to make aspirin back in the day. Like she was on her game.
She was a genius. I mean,
yeah, she was
unmitigated genius,
and an artist and a musician, and like she was phenomenal. But her manuscripts are fairly easy to find now if you want to know what medieval medicine that worked really looked like.
Yeah.
And take a lot of that out because she didn't understand all of the mechanisms, right? Because, you know, we still don't understand a lot of the mechanisms. But
yeah, and also not having the technology to do proper scientific research, let alone metrics, makes it a big problem. Plus, there's the humors. It was popular for several thousand years. Everybody was into the humors. But if you are running your scientific theories off of the 4 humors, you're just not going to ever come to the correct conclusion about why and what this is actually doing.
And this is where things get interesting. Yeah. You can get close. And this is where I think a lot of people get wrong about older forms of knowledge. Like, when we're talking about the Ptolemaic model of the universe, the reason that persisted for so long was the math worked. Mm-hmm. There were 2 things that it had slight problems with that they found excuses for, like why does Venus occasionally move backwards? Why does Mercury occasionally move backwards? But they figured out ways around it because the math worked. You can create a functional model that is wrong, that has valid uses. And that's something that I think I've seen some fantasy stories explore in very interesting ways that a lot of them don't, just because they use different words, and sometimes words that we would like declaratively know, like that's wrong. That's not how that works. That doesn't mean that the treatments and stuff that they came up with were invalid. So when you're playing around, especially with world building, think about what would be around, what would be available to people. Because one of the most powerful episodes of like Star Trek is this episode where Picard and Crusher get marooned on a planet and she needs medicine. And so she has him testing herbs and various roots on himself to see if they might have medicinal properties. That's real life lore. Like that's something that people did. Like if you take that root and you put it on and it has a yellowish tinge to it and you rub it on your skin and it turns slightly red, that will probably help stop bleeding and prevent infection. That's like a real thing. There's a lot of that old school knowledge that's been lost that could be really fun to build in, because I think, and this is not me going after Lit RPG. Lit RPG is awesome, but the problem is a lot of fantasy stories that are not Lit RPG have become Lit RPG over the years, because we're so used to our games where I'm just going to go to the shop and pick up the herbs, right? I'm going to go to the shop and get my thing. Yep. That's not how...
It's sort of like a post-industrial revolution idea of pre-industrial revolution world would function. And it's like, that just literally wasn't even in the vocabulary. That wasn't a thing. You couldn't do it.
So they would have known when they're walking through a field, oh, I need this plant and that plant and the other plant, right? And would go and find those plants and have a rudimentary knowledge of how to do it themselves. I think one of the biggest flaws that I see in a lot of fantasy writing, especially, and in a lot of science fiction writing, because once we start exploring other planets, some of these universal truths
we're going
to have to go back to that because, well, you're on a planet and you need to find a medicinal herb because somebody's hurt and you can't get back, right? You need to know something.
Got to cut.
Right, because alkalines and bases will work the same no matter what planet you're on. Those are universal
Cross your fingers, hoping it stays that way.
Yes.
We don't know. I'm teasing.
But
it is fun about science fiction. Of like, that's why I can understand why science fiction and fantasy go together in genres, like as far as libraries and so on, is because there are these callbacks they both have to each other because that is called world exploration. That's just how it goes.
And so remember, they would be a lot more resourceful than most of our characters in science fiction would be. Like they would know, like if you're writing a dumb brute who runs around with a sword fighting monsters, you better believe he knows what herbs he can pull out of the ground to staunch bleeding, to prevent infection, to keep him alive, because he would die if he didn't.
Yes. I mean, children literally knew a lot of rudimentary plant identification and what you use it for and when you use it. Most children knew like a lot of childbirthing herbs. It was so common that you started teaching them as toddlers. Oh, what is that? Do you remember what we call that? Now, do you remember what it's for? I mean, to 3-year-olds, because this is how you survive in a world where there's no antibiotics. No modern antibiotics. Yes, you could drink beer and surely rudimentary beer will have some basic penicillin or something like that in it. But for, the rociferin, no. So you're going to know all of these. Everybody, the morons knew it. The village idiot knew it. The kings knew it. Nobody was exempt from knowing this information because it was considered right up there with how to breathe and how to walk. And do you know how to dress yourself? Well, then do you know what mugwort is for?
Because this is one of the problems that I have with a lot of fantasy is like George R. R. Martin can try to say, well, there has to be that much rape and incest in it because that's historically valid, even though it's a world that you created and can have any history that you want.
Yeah.
But if you're going to go for historical accuracy, like your heroes should be a lot more resourceful than they are. They should know things about their environment that they obviously don't know in your stories because you would not survive otherwise. Like until you get really into the early to late Renaissance, you're not having these massive courts of valets and whatnot. The kingdoms were struggling to get by. So everyone had to know how to pitch in, how to do this, that, and the other thing. People were working around the farm, except for maybe at the very tippity top, right? But let's face it, most of our stories aren't about kings. They're about the barons, dukes, lords, knights, and what have you below. They would have a lot more knowledge and a lot more access to things. We're just projecting backwards because today we have doctors, which is a specialized class that has specialized knowledge. They didn't have access to that. Everyone had a rudimentary knowledge of how to survive because living past 10 was a feat.
You were considered blessed.
Yeah.
You must be blessed if you've survived childhood.
Yep.
You must be.
Yep.
Because it's so hard and it's so rare between the plagues and the infections, the dysentery, everything else going around. Hey, I mean, it's just how it was.
Yep.
Which is why we had marriages at like 13 and stuff. Because it was like,
well, I mean,
before the number.
You better hurry up and have a kid because you're probably not going to be living for much longer. Like, if this species is going to go on, you can have a kid, have a kid, have a kid. We need more people.
Get that done now, just in case you don't make it.
Because I mean, it was a nightmare. Like it's hard for us to understand what life would have been like back then. But also remember, if you're doing a fantasy world, you have ultimate control. I get really mad at the idea of realism in fantasy because one, that's an oxymoron, and just stop it. Because like the whole point of fantasy fiction is not realism, is not having things that break with reality. That's what realism is. It is the sister genre to fantasy. And then you have
Are you talking about urban fantasy when you say realism?
No, I'm talking about, okay, realism is actually a branch of a full-on genre that really puts the argument forward that everything has to correspond to something in the real world. And it is a genre in of itself. Fantasy was never intended to have that. And the fact that it's getting pushed in there starts posing problems because, like I said, like, love or hate George R.R. Martin's work, you can't tell me that your books have to have all of the rape, misogyny, and homophobia because that's historically accurate. That is a lie. You created Westeros. There is no Westeros.
Yeah.
It's not real.
It's not real.
Like, nobody could have gone there, not even with a time machine.
Right. There's no way to go there. It has the rules that you want it to have. And like with urban fantasy, yeah, you have to figure out, especially if it's going to be something like the Dresden Files, that is urban fantasy that really takes place in our world. You have to incorporate aspects of our world into the magic. And I don't have a problem with that. But there's been this trend that started before Gur got famous and really went hardcore when A Game of Thrones was turned into a TV series of trying to put realism into fantasy. That is literally an oxymoron. Remember, there are two branches of fantasy. There's high fantasy and low fantasy. High fantasy is any fantasy story that takes place in a secondary world that is not Earth. That's all high fantasy means. Low fantasy is any fantasy that Earth exists in. So whether that be portal fantasy like Narnia, where you go through a magical cupboard and get to the magic world, or whether that be Harry Potter, where it's secretly buried somewhere and you don't see it, which is in a Polder or Wainscot society. Those are the two branches of fantasy. If you're doing true secondary world high fantasy, there's no such thing as realism. I'm sorry, there's not. You have full control over the world.
Yeah.
So just because
the rules and you can go against the like if you're trying to go historical accuracy and you're basing it off the 1950s,
then write a book like Her Majesty's
you'd
Dragon.
only adhere to like jump.
Right.
But like if it was low fantasy 1950s, then you're gonna probably have some racism. But if it's high fantasy and you're getting inspired by 1950s, why wouldn't you remove that?
That's up to you. That's up to you. Like if your story is about people struggling with racism, okay, include it. If that's not, if that does not serve a function, remember, as writers, our job is not to mirror reality. Our job is to tell a good story. Good stories have nothing to do with reality.
Right. You tell a lie to tell the truth.
Because you have to simplify.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
We tell lies to then tell the truth of whatever the truth we want for that story. What is the truth in this story? Now let me lie to you all about it to take you on this journey. Down
It's the message. There's the theme of the story.
And so, especially when we get on the topic of food, medicine, and culture, like the things that are written on the screen down below us, this is where fantasy goes just utterly crazy and bizarre because it's trying to apply modern paradigms to these things. And that can work. I've seen that work. That can work really, really well. But then they try to say that they're doing it in the name of realism. Well, actually, if you're doing that in the name of realism, your fantasy story would look much more like a Brother Cadfael novel.
Yes.
Where he's out in his herb garden trying to figure out what he can mix together to make lost blood reappear on a stone, because he learned that from the Arabs when he was fighting in the Crusades.
Yes.
Like that's what realism would look like, because he would have that knowledge, because they needed to see where the infection was. Mm-hmm. And so he learned, if I put these compounds together and wash something in it, it will make the blood and the bodily fluids visible on the thing. Well, that's a real thing. Mm-hmm. But he would know that from the herbs. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, it's a different mindset. It's a much more holistic mindset that would be in that fantasy setting, especially if you're in a pre-industrial setting. Like, things are not going to be as specialized as they often appear in fantasy. Because they just couldn't be.
Yeah, everybody was a
Just
generalist.
couldn't be.
You just needed to be a generalist to survive. I understand as a modern generalist that this is my jam. But that is what everybody did because you couldn't go to an encyclopedia. You could not Google it. You could not even go to necessarily one person in your village who was like had been studying this exclusively instead of other employment for their whole life. There was not anyone like that. There was nobody like that.
And I would say, like, the one closest exception I could come to that is there probably would have been a baker in town who would have specialized in making the grains that people were spending their entire time harvesting into something edible. Like, there would have been some like quasi specialization there. The person who owned the mill, the millers, right? They would exist, but they would still have their own farm that they would be running in the back lot for the food that they were doing. One of the members of the family would be out hunting or doing some form of animal husbandry for meat or food. And there's a certain
in order to have the yeast for the bread.
Yep. There's just so much modern specialization that gets written back into realistic depictions of fantasy worlds that drives me crazy because it is anything but realistic. It feels realistic to us because it mirrors our modern world.
Yeah.
But when you start looking...
I feel like there should be some case of that. When we talked about this a little bit when we were doing, when I was on Morgan's stream this panel this morning about language and how we are trying to write about another world, but we have to allow our readers who are in this contemporary world understand it.
Yep.
And so we can't always hold to the original language, the original
very much
information. So that's where that's about the only time where I can give an author a pass is it's like they were unable to explain it in any other way than just breaking the fourth wall at this point. Almost, where you have to call it Wolfsbane even though it would have been called something else then or something. I'm just pulling that one out.
Or just learn
make it up. Make up. I mean, like,
that too.
All of this jewelry is actually my great grandmother's, and every piece. This is smoked topaz, and that has significance. I mean, there are reasons that she had smoked topaz, as well as this one is citrine. And again, there were spiritual and health reasons, as well as this gold bracelet was also meant to give strength and purity. And then inscribed with her name on it underneath where people couldn't see it necessarily. All of this, and, you know, she was born, 1880s? Yeah. Tom's back here as my peanut gallery. And
we guessed. We heard the voice.
Did you hear him a little? He's kind of mouthy, isn't he? Anyway, welcome to my childhood. So all of these has significance. Are these modern society's ideas of what smoked topaz means, or citrine, or even gold? Hell no. No, because she was Hungarian. So this is what it meant to 1880s Hungarians. So that's it.
But that's what gives your story flavor. And that's why I get really frustrated is I feel like there's so much sameness in fantasy nowadays because, like I said, it feels like it should be in a monster manual printed for D&D or an expansion to, World of Warcraft or a further edition of The Lord of the Rings. And there's room for some of that. And I'm not saying there's not. Like, lit RPG is a thing. I'm not taking a crap on lit RPG. Like, if you want to write that, write it. But there's a genre for that.
Sci-fi writers crib each other's worlds a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as that's something you're really into, you're grooving to, rather than you just think, well, no, this is the fantasy world with a capital F. Rather than, no, make it what you want.
Yes.
But keep things in mind about how your society runs. And that includes magic is not likely to ever be as specialized as how fantasy writers lately have been writing it. It's going to be far more generalized, with people of very spiritual purity and study. So monks have more time to study it. Some priests, but not all priests, have more time to study. They're going to be using the magic more than, say, peasants, farmers, which farmers, by the way, are small business people. Peasants are physically and legally tied to the land. Serfs, call it what you will. My mother called it slavery. It is. So if you're literally not allowed to leave the land, guess what you are? So, why is it people keep leaving out slavery in their fantasy worlds, but not rape? Seems interesting.
Yeah, because it's what's more comfortable to write or what's a kink. And again, not kink shaming anyone, but know what you're doing and don't use excuses. You know what I'm saying? This is the problem.
I had to include this. Did you know?
Yeah. Did you?
Is it useful to your story, or is it just because you thought, rape and murder mayhem makes flavor death? No.
Oh, let's be honest. We're talking about that asshole. I wanted to rape and murder all my bullies from high school.
Yes.
By name.
Yes, by name.
By actual name.
That's why he can't finish the last book. He ran out of bullies to inspire him.
The plot twist, the last book has no deaths.
No, they're all dead already. He doesn't hate anybody left.
Everybody lives. Woo!
Woo! It's ruined.
It's just not the same to kill an imaginary person.
Oh. Yeah,
So when you're doing your world building, make sure that you're thinking about what would they have at the dinner table? Just ask yourself that. It may never show up. Janet over at World Anvil likes to talk about the elf
Do they have a
booth.
holiday like Thanksgiving? Yeah.
everybody's got festivals.
Janet likes to talk about the elf boots because if you read enough fantasy, you know exactly what that means. Everybody has their freaking elf boots. Do they matter? No. They just put them in because Tolkien had magic elf boots that help people walk. So everybody's got their elf boots. Don't make elf boots unless they matter. Find the things that make your story better.
Feel the need for it. I hate walking. I just am like, why isn't this happening faster? Because I got these little short legs, and it's just I'll be here forever.
Although the one I always feel personal for, that it really no one steals for some reason, is the lemla spread?
Yes.
Of mostly because I make that occasionally.
Oh, dwarven war bread?
Yeah, it's a little bit of it will keep you going for a long time. It's so dense. It's
so dense, y'all. We literally knocked a cat over by accident when it fell, okay? And a cat walked by and got brained with it and was like, what happened? When a loaf of bread fell down and the cat was walking by. And I was like, oh, God, the cat has, a concussion.
But that's what made Tolkien stand out, because I love Tolkien. I need to preface with everything I'm about to say with I love Tolkien. I literally have a copy of the Silmarillion beside me at all times, and I refer to it not so jokingly as the Bible. I love Tolkien. He is a dry writer. He was trying to mimic medieval manuscripts. And if you've never actually tried to read The Lord of the Rings, they're written in the style of a medieval manuscript, and they are meant to be read in this like a medieval manuscript. The story does not move back and forth. It follows a character for a while and then stops, and then picks up another character at some point previously, tells you what happened to them for a while. They're written like medieval manuscripts. Right. The reason people have gotten so obsessive about his work is the detail and the flavor that came into it. The lemnis bread is a very good example of that. The various drinks and foods and festivals that are peppered throughout the stories, the memories that Sam and Frodo use to help them get through the long and arduous walk to Mordor. It's those little bits of flavor that make people remember and obsess about his work. And if you're not crafting that for yours, it's going to be, people aren't going to have that handle to hold on.
Yeah.
Jim Henson, who's always been a hero of mine, said that all fiction requires a handle. Whenever you're creating anything, you need to have one thing that somebody can literally put their hand on to hold on to it so that they know what it is. And you need to figure out what your handles are. Food is a very good and easy way to do that because everybody has the experience of the communal meal, the sacred meal, right? Because whether you've actually experienced a religious ceremony or just seen them on TV, like culturally, you understand what that is, right? These are touchstones that we all have. The special beverage that we only make when the moon is in a certain phase and it's a certain temperature outside, right? Think about it. Like even today, we have the Feast of the Holy Pumpkin Spice.
Oh, are we talking about pumpkin spice?
Right? Because you have your pumpkin spice, you have your eggnog, you have
Do we just go
your various wassails and whatnot.
Blue vine for
these
Christmas.
seasonal cultural traditions.
That when a culture doesn't have it, it will find one.
As a fantasy reader, I love to eat and drink along with my book. Like it is truly like, so guess what? Totally into Redwall. I loved every one of Brian Jake's descriptions of like acorn pancakes and elderberry jam and whatever, make some stuff up. I don't care. I didn't know maple cream was the thing. And I thought he made it up. And then I was like, I went to Vermont. I was like, oh, this is real. Finally, I am living the Redwall Abbey lifestyle. I absolutely love food mentioned, especially in fantasy, because if anything, because it's people with less technology. If anything, I can relate a bit more to it because I don't need technology that doesn't yet exist in my society, like sci-fi sometimes does, or most of the time does. But also with fantasy, it's foods that I probably can find something similar and eat. So there's gourds. Guess what? Gloria's going to have pumpkin or acorn squash to go with it. I love that.
Anne McCaffrey. Yeah.
I'm done. I promise.
And Anne McCaffrey published recipes to go alongside the Pern books. If you want to know what claw is, everybody in the Pern books drinks claw. She published the recipe for claw. I have it in my kitchen. We have a container that always has, because it's a dry powder made from cocoa powder, instant coffee and sugar that you mix together, and you mix it into hot water or milk to make it into a beverage. It is so good. It is bitter and dark as my soul, and I love it.
And she describes it regularly.
Yes,
in her series, which of course I love.
Oh yes, that's right. The other author trope people keep forgetting now, which is where's the coffee? There's always some form of something coffee-like bitter that people drink at various times of the day and night.
But the various stews that are mentioned in the hall, she put out recipes for all of them, so you can make them yourself, because those were all inspired by family recipes of hers. Like she put out basically, it's not even a side recipe book in the Dragon Lover's Guide to Pern. It includes the recipes for many of the dishes that are prominent throughout the stories, and you can eat along with it, which gives you such a connection to those worlds. I love Anne McCaffrey. I love the Dragon Riders of Pern books. Yeah. They've never been turned into a movie, a TV show, a video game, or a comic, or any of that, because she held the rights very close to her chest. But I'm obsessive about it because
like the great stories, people talk about that food. It's just that common thread, like you were talking about, that handle.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, like
I know that for me,
it's a thing.
Yeah.
So everybody can find some food thing mentioned in a story and relate to it. You don't have the technology, may not have the agrarian society, but you've got food. And this is what readers love. It is a way to get in and help keep that suspension of disbelief, because that's really what we're selling. Keep suspending that disbelief.
For me, just from the outside, I guess, is like from the Harry Potter books, butterbeer, the every flavor, bots, beans, whatever. And then take Game of Thrones. The wolf bread that was made. I mean, it was just simple. It was bread and it was shaped of a wolf, but everyone like kind of clung to that a little bit. But they, like you said, we may not be able to do the actual meal, but then also it could help you when you're thinking about food. My dog's bothering me right now. When you're thinking about food, it can help you get to figure out how your story lays out, because food is determined to where you live. So that can help you maybe lay out the geographic area, be like, hey, can they grow wheat, or can they do other aspect? I can't even think of it right now. But my point is that can help you guide in other areas of your world building if you think about food. If you get hung up in something else.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it doesn't matter what kind of story you're trying to write. Even if you're writing a military story, armies armies progress on their bellies. There is military food. Soldiers will talk. Sailors will talk ad nauseum about food because it's either that or the girl they left behind.
And how it affects culture. You have turkey because during World War II, turkey was cheap and they fed it to all the soldiers for Thanksgiving. Because it was cheap and they could get a lot of it. And the soldiers remembered it and then started it as a tradition here. That was not a common American tradition to have turkey for Thanksgiving.
Common for Thanksgiving because it's right around the time for hog killing season.
So that's same with coffee. Coffee and especially instant coffee. Like if you remember your grandparents being obsessed with instant coffee, that's because probably one of your grandfather probably served in the military and was used to the instant coffee, and it was a comforting thing that they had during the horrors and hell of war that they kept with them when they got home because it took on this quality of comfort and it meant something to them. Food has meanings, whether it's the favorite food that you had as a child or that thing that gave you solace during war. It's it's something that you are going to bring home with you, and it is going to show so much about your characters and your setting if you bring it in like that way.
Another thing that food can help you with is that maybe there is smells, if you are smelling it being cooked, that your characters can soak in, and that will help bring readers into them as well.
They can do memories that help fill out their character for the reader without it being like a full-fledged, here we are back in the ellipsis. You don't have to do that. But you can just say, oh, that reminds me, and they can literally talk to other characters. And also at the same time as filling out their character, they can be building bonds with other characters. Food is a wonderful communal activity, and also the memory of it. Oh, everybody I know who travels loves to talk about the food they've eaten in other places and the food they eat it back home. Wherever they are, they're talking about other places of food, and it is a bonding experience among travelers when I've traveled.
Another thing that
it also can. Oh yeah, go ahead.
That you can really use to show that remembering home and at the same time a bonding experience with other people, as well as to get back to medicine and food that was common is no longer thought of is your home spice, which was everyone traveled with a little packet of a ground up set of spices that was what kept them healthy. What we now think of as a multivitamin even was this home spice blend you kept with you. And that was also your taste of home.
Yes.
And everyone, when they traveled, exchanged, what's your home spice taste like?
Yes. It was specifically tailored to their health as well. So, going back to those 4 humors. So whatever they had in excess, it would help keep that down. But they would also, at tables and inns, give each other little flavors of it on their food so everybody could try each other's home spice in their little baggies. This was a real thing, and it went on for 1,000 years or more. Really, a couple thousand, really, because I know the Greeks did it as well.
I find that interesting because I think of also food as it sometimes can be, even when you have a language barrier, food can be that thing that bonds new meetings and stuff, where you start to have a common ground with the other person that you haven't even spoken to yet.
I'll tell you, when I was a teenager, I was, heavily reading. I was reading a book a day. So I was reading a lot of library books. And I read plenty of fantasy books and other books that talked about, breaking bread with strangers who you don't necessarily even share a language, and how it's so bonding. And I thought at the time, I'm going to admit, I was that teenager, I thought, this is a load of bunk. They're romanticizing this story. Blah, 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 blah. Fast forward to I'm 18 years old. I'm traveling to the Philippines. And let me tell you, I did not speak Tagalog, Visayan, any of the languages. And yet it's literally true. If you literally break your role and give them half. And then even if you have it, offer them butter. Suddenly you've got a new best friend and you guys are going off, and it doesn't matter that neither of you speak French. It really does work. I'm not making this up. I want everyone to know this is a real thing about humans. We are truly pack animals, and we will pack bond with anyone over half a roll and some butter. And it is wonderful. And so I used to think it was romantic.
I think it's mostly the butter.
You know, I really feel like bread is a vehicle for butter. So yeah, totally 1,000% agree. Butter is
my kids, both of them, they both have gone through phases where they just want to eat the butter, like grab a stick of it. And I'm like, no, I'm drawing the line.
I have literally licked, like gotten a tablespoon or two off, put it on a fork, and just walked around licking that. I'm like, you know, it's got the same amount of fat as a peanut butter if I did that with a big spoonful, so it's fat. It's not that often. It's about 3 times a year. It's like butter. Obviously, I'm a butter deficit. Anyway.
For me, that's me and cookie dough. I know dough. It has the warning on it, but
you know, the likelihood of you getting salmonella from local chicken eggs is far lower now. So I'd just like to point out, if you can find locally raised chickens eggs, you can just eat that cookie dough with abandon. I'm just throwing that out there. But I did want people to know of, like, there are these bonding activities that we read about, and I think most of them are actually based in reality about how humans are. And don't be afraid to include that in your story building and in your character development. And also, you could do that in science fiction. You can do that in contemporary fiction. There's no genre that you cannot do that. And I have even read 2 reptilian hominids doing the exact same thing, breaking off in space, breaking off their ration bar and exchanging each other's ration bars and having, I don't know, some sort of reptilian hominid conversation. But it still was interesting, and I was very much into their tails. They did things with their tails, like both communicating and also throwing themselves because they had low gravity in their space. Anyway, I'm not getting into that. But can you see ADHD tangents?
Or Penumbra, you notice Penumbra's writing.
Oh, Penumbra.
No, but it's hard to get to now, but you know, she was talking about the, is that noodles or is that tentacles? And she had a ovo-lacto-vegetarian in a society of carnivores. And just apparently so all these aliens are just fascinated watching her main character try to figure out what's she eating and if she feels comfortable eating it.
It's fun to explore that way. It's a fun way.
Yeah. I love food.
I do too.
It really, it can bring us together, and even if it divides us, like modern day right now, how some people feel if vegetarian or vegan is the way to go, and
like that people made food political. But
on the flip side of that, we all still need to eat. So we all still, like, if something tastes good, we'll go for it.
Oh, once you're at the
like it's
the pig and the law, the rules of look, it's about your life.
Well, Tom brought up about, so in Judaism, there's kashrut, there's kosher. Mm-hmm. And, you know, probably most Americans are at least mildly familiar with, like, oh, pig is treif, pig is poison, pig is not kosher. However, part of kashrut, part of the laws of kosher is if it will save your life, all bets are off, do what you need to do. And that includes if you're on a desert island, it's you and a pig.
Oh.
Have at it. Do what you need to do.
I like that pass.
And that's actually true of a lot of things with Judaism. You know, there's no point in following laws that will affect anyone's health or life. Mm-hmm. So pretty much all bets are off if anybody's life is even mildly endangered. You know, like they might die. No, might is not okay. No. You take the medicine, you do whatever. It doesn't matter what the laws are, what the kosher rules are. It doesn't matter, because living is more important This is the tenant. So, and it can be a very interesting way to portray that in character development and in your stories, where you have a character who has certain food rules or food guidelines, food laws, and then they're in a situation where they're in a conflict with their own personal guidelines or rules, and how they navigate that tells us so much about the character, tells us so much about their culture, their religion, whatever it is, and it tells us about the world that they're currently in where they're having to adapt. It's a very useful plot device that still feels natural to people, because we understand that in real life people get in these situations. What does a vegan do if they're at a steakhouse? They got to think fast. They got to start asking probing, penetrating questions really quickly, because they have to suddenly think in carnivore world mindset, like, oh, I like a baked potato, no bacon on it. You know, like they have to start thinking pretty quickly, and that can be a really interesting way to help us understand the character, their culture, as well as the environment they're currently in. It's very useful, while also, of course, food. We all get to talk about food. We all relate. So the reader remains interested, even though the conflict may be at odds with the reader's personal experiences.
Something I haven't thought of yet that just clicked in my mind is, would allergies, like food allergies, have existed back then? You know,
I mean,
you don't read much about it.
It's not as likely, simply because allergy is an autoimmune disease, which means the immune system turns on itself. Okay. And it's not as likely, since everybody's immune system back then was really busy working on all the diseases that they were being inundated with, so their bodies were constantly fighting diseases that we normally, let's be honest, you get a viral infection, and then you get a secondary sinus infection that's bacterial. So you go to the doctor, you get yourself some antibiotics. 2 weeks later, you're right as rain. You're fine. You may have a little postnasal drip, but you're fine. Versus somebody else would, 1,000 years ago, would be fighting this for like a solid 3 months, maybe longer. And they would feel pretty rough the whole time. I know, because I've been there, because my family didn't always have access to doctors. So I've had it when I was 15 years old, I caught an upper respiratory infection that lasted 4 months. And it's hell. It's hell. It was all winter, and there wasn't anything we had available to help with it. So I just had to sleep sitting up for 4 months, and it was miserable. And I lived on coffee and tuna sandwiches. Coffee helps you breathe.
That was me. I think when I had mono, I had to sleep sitting up.
Right.
And I think Eva brought up a good point, just Eva, where she said what it probably was misdiagnosed as like poison or something. If
you smell something close and then you start sneezing, that's like...
I think, if I remember correctly, Hildegard actually mentions hay fever.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
In her medical book, because
allergies,
it would happen every year at the same time, and you would when you smell it on the wind, and it causes symptoms on you. I do believe Hildegard mentions hay fever and a couple other allergies of that nature, but I don't know that they would have confused it, because this is, to me, one of the more interesting things when you're thinking about a medievalized or a pre-industrial society, is we tend to infantilize people and assume that they had different intelligences than the ones that we have now. Like, I remember growing up, my great-grandfather had a bucket of something that he just called salve, which was a whole bunch of things that he mixed together that none of us learned how to make, and I wish we could. Like, he would get bit by a copperhead, put his hand in the bucket, and he'd be fine, because it would draw the poison out.
Alcohol?
No, it was.
No, alcohol does not draw venom out.
I don't know what was in there, but it was brownish black and disgusting. And I would see him feed herbs to it occasionally, various plants and stuff, occasionally, and mix it in.
Writers are getting ideas for something, because it sounds like a pet.
It very much was his pet. And like, Grandma remembers him telling her the recipe at one point, and she was just like, it was so many things, and he said it was just easier to keep it alive. because it was basically this fermented herb goo that you just kept going. And he used it for everything. Like if he got a cut, he would just smear it on himself. Right. And he never got bad infections. Like he lived to be 103 years old.
Wow.
You know, I mean,
that's fantastic.
You know, something worked out.
Yeah.
We need that recipe. If he can send it from beyond the grave, that'd be great.
But they had different intelligences than the ones that we have now. And so food allergies would become fairly obvious because one, they tend to run in families. And so you would notice, oh, Bobby ate the thing and they died. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a different way of looking at the world. But again, like you were saying, you know, with most allergies being autoimmune issues, most of our allergies exist because our houses are too clean and that we ourselves are too clean. That is, we've done a double take on ourselves where we keep our environments way too clean, and then we're overly polluting them because we're putting in all of the energy safe windows and stuff so that airflow isn't happening. So we're trapping noxious gases in the house while killing off the bacteria. So we're poisoning ourselves with things that aren't bacteria and viruses while not exposing ourselves to bacteria and viruses. And our immune system doesn't just sit there going, whew, luckily I don't have anything to do today. It goes, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? And if it doesn't find something, it'll find something.
I have a friend who, when her daughters were much younger, they had been at, a young age in elementary school diagnosed with allergies. And I'm like, excuse me, why do you have children with allergies? You live in the country. And she said, I don't know what happened. And I told her, just go let them play outside. I've seen your kids. They never play outside. So she started after school every day, sending them outside to literally go play in the dirt. She literally said, like, do not come back home clean. And they would go outside and literally put dirt on themselves and play. And they would just sit out there for a while and have a good time. They were like 2 years apart in age, so that was a good time for them. And all their allergies went away. Plant the microbes that grow around plants are not normally opportunistic on human beings, but they do take up real estate on us. And so their bodies then had something to focus on without overdoing it. Their allergies went away for, as I understand, like 10, 12 years now. They have not really had allergy problems.
I never had allergies until we moved to Maryland.
Hey, sweet baby. Sorry, Charlie. You're cute, Tim.
I'm not that cute. Like, I get it.
You don't have little ears and a shoe, let me.
How do y'all know? I always wear these things. You don't even know if I have ears.
Well, I mean, you don't have them at all. I don't know how cute that's going to be, like, other than from a frog perspective, maybe.
I just didn't like, so I'm like moving a little bit, and I didn't want people to think anything was going on, so had to.
I don't think people are worried about that, but I am here for every excuse to show us your pets and your babies and your children.
Like I was saying, I never had allergies. I grew up on a farm, and I never had allergies until we moved to Maryland, and I started living in an apartment building. Right. And so I was living in a cleaner state. I was not going out and playing in the mud and the dirt and everything, and I started developing allergies then. That's when they came along, and there is some truth to that. And yes, some allergies do get worse the more that you come into contact with them.
My father grew up on an egg farm, and he was very allergic to chicken feathers and had to go get shots every week for, like, I think a solid 8 or 9 years, something like that. And then he eventually grew out of it. But yeah, it was miserable. He hated it. It was big old terrible, syringes from the 50s. Well, from the late 40s. You can imagine how theatrical they were. They were metal. They were shiny. But he was very allergic to chickens. Nobody would have thought, if somebody was allergic to chickens, that this person was imbued with the devil. They would have thought, oh, this person is literally allergic to birds. And you can have that from anyone at any time period in history.
Well, humans have had a lot more body awareness because humans have only so much attention.
Yep.
Well, if you don't have a cell phone to take up most of your attention or a computer,
have you ever done a meditation
I feel
retreat?
Personally attacked right now.
Oh, but you're just seen, sweetie. You're not attacked. It's just we're seeing you for who you really are.
And if you don't understand that, do a meditation retreat. Go to a place where they take all of your electronic devices from you. You're not supposed to talk, and you just sit in silence for 3 days. You'll learn a lot about yourself.
A lot of thoughts, a lot of just sitting there watching bugs for a lot of time. Been there.
Or getting really good at meditation. Those are your options.
No.
Are you allowed candles or something?
Sometimes, yeah, depending on the retreat, yeah. But my option was
hopefully no one steals my candles, because then I'll just be delighted.
You'll learn a lot about yourself. You really, really will.
Oh,
but
yeah. I'm sure, like, that much time, that much silence by yourself, like, it's probably uncomfortable. Like, I'm sure, entire process of, like, at first it's like, yeah, and then it's like uncomfortable, and then it's like,
and then you literally have to shake. It comes to, like, as somebody who's done retreats periodically throughout their lives, there is the moment that if you have a good person leading the retreat, that they will warn you about. And this is something that everybody should know who's writing stories about somebody who gets like lost in the woods or something. About 1.5 to 3 days in, depending on how used to being around sounds you will start having the shakes, and you will find yourself extremely disoriented, not knowing which way is up, down, left, or right, because your brain has basically gone into panic search mode. Like, I should be hearing car sounds. I should be hearing these sounds. They're not here. Where are they? Like, your brain will literally have an internal panic attack, and you will experience it as almost dizziness to an almost hallucinogenic experience where you will start hearing car noises that aren't there because your brain's like, no, it should be here. I was wondering
I wonder if that's tied into
we'll hear noises that
we think we hear. Oh my goodness! When we think we hear someone call our name, and it's usually, like, for me, I remember growing up, it was always like around 3 o'clock in the afternoon after I've been home by myself all day, and it was.
Yeah, that's why I normally get
called my name.
That's normally why I have a cat, is to blame all the weird noises, and because cats can meow where it almost sounds like a baby or like somebody calling your name far off. And guess what? That's what a cat is for. And I think all writers should have one, just to blame all the noises on.
I had cats growing up. Maybe it was the cats then.
You're a familiar of some sort. All writers should have a familiar.
I have cats now.
I agree. But cats are really easy to blame things on.
Yeah.
Because they're like so stealthy / they're absolute jokes, either jesters. You ever seen one jump? They're not good at it.
But, anytime you take something away from someone, they will have a physiological response to no longer having it. And it's something that, in talking about like food and stuff, if you're going to be writing a story like that where somebody is going into deprivation, watch something like an Alone or a Naked and Afraid, or something where you can literally watch people going through that. Talk to somebody who's been deprived, because you will start having weird cravings, weird feelings, weird sensations. You will start hallucinating auditorily, sometimes visually, because when you're not experiencing things that your body expects to experience, it will start filling the gap. It will bring all of that to you. And then there's a certain point that you will eventually get past that. And that's when you can really start doing the work at a retreat, which is why most retreats last minimum 3 days, because day and a half, you have that freak out moment. And then the last day, you can actually do the work that you're there to do.
I always like that moment where my brain starts making me think that there's illusions or hallucinations, because my mother would always tell me when I was a kid, when that would happen, oh, that's just the spirit well bleeding through, just ignore it. And they're like, oh, okay. And so I'm just like, oh, well, y'all need to move that train on. This is not, a train depot. So that's what my mother always told me. And she said her grandmother always told her that, of like, when you hear these things, where you're hearing things or seeing things that are not supposed to be there, that's just other worlds bleeding through. Ignore it. It'll move on. And so I found
Stop. That's what my sci-fi book is about. Don't say it.
I found Constantine, the movie, to be very comforting. I'm like, oh, it's not just me. And as well as Sixth Sense. When I get homesick, or my parents have passed away, when I get homesick for them, I watch Sixth Sense and Constantine, because it reminds me of my childhood.
And Also remember, just a couple other things.
Yeah, I love it.
Dappled light causes hallucinations in 90% of people. So if you're out in the woods for an extended period of time, you will start seeing things that aren't there. It will happen. They've done experiments, and it actually requires a very specific combination of color and light. So the sunlight has to be going through green leaves. You will not experience this as much in the fall as you do in the spring and in summer months. But you will start seeing things.
I'm just saying. I had a therapist who literally did this therapy for me. It's really helpful. It helps a lot with dealing with trauma, and it's very useful for your PTSD. So if you are experiencing PTSD issues, maybe a walk in the woods in the summer.
And also, green light is calming, so they would also experience much more like relaxation than we would normally expect in that, just because they're literally in a dopamine factory. Like
dopamine factory.
You're in a place that is meant to do that. And again, just always give them the skills. Just give them the skills.
Mm-hmm. Instead of infantilizing all your characters, that they're all idiots and they don't have any education.
Unless that's the story you're writing, then more power to you. I don't kink shame anybody. But
I mean, yeah.
Because I mean, sometimes there's a place for that in the story. But...
Oh, if you haven't seen The Civilization of Maxwell Bright, I highly recommend the first 5 minutes. If you're over 18. Just if you're over 18.
Yeah.
Yep. Anyway. So, wrapping up, because we are getting close to time. Whose show is next? I am not here.
I actually have the playlist over here.
Oh, good, because I'm like, I've got it somewhere.
So after us is Haley Haggerty.
Yay!
Outlining your fantasy novel.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
It sounds great. I hope everyone will join. The playlist, I believe the playlist is down in the description. I hope I did. I hope Passport took care of this. Does anybody have any last kind of anything you'd like to talk about while we still have? I mean, because we've still got 8 to 20 minutes left.
I can do 8. I can't do 8.
I know. I'm really surprised that the toddler has allowed you to be here with us.
Well, so when I snuck upstairs, he was actually eating his. So I had that. And right now, I hear him with the little plastic golf club just banging around, and I haven't heard my husband yell. So either he's knocked out, or it's not as bad as I think it is.
I can't wait for the Instagram story.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, did either of you have any parts of food and medicine in world building you want to talk about before we?
One last thing, just because I didn't see a specific panel on this, and that is music was seen by most cultures and still to this day to have medicinal qualities.
Yes.
There were songs and chants that parents would sing, that children would sing to their parents, that priests would sing, that various healers would sing, because the sounds were believed to bring about healing. We actually know that can be soothing and help with some things now, and they're bringing a lot of that back in. But song is often missed when dealing with magic, healing, any of these things. And especially back in the day, the priest, the preacher, the whatever, the healer, the midwife would have been singing. There would have been
into a bar.
There would have been drums playing. There would have been instruments, various musical instruments used in all of these services and settings.
Yeah.
And that often gets...
I could definitely see the voices, Celtic voices. I mean, not that the music now is the same that was used in the 1300s, but still that almost angelic voice, very high. I don't know the names of the octaves, but those are very Interesting.
It's one of the things that often gets missed when you're doing this. And it's one thing that I always I'm like, no, they would have been singing when they did that. Like, nobody burns sage and doesn't sing or chant while it's burning.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, nobody's burning sweet herbs without chanting, singing, all of the above, playing an instrument for a long period of time till the smoke entirely dissipates, as well as the scent. I mean, like, it's a thing. It's a whole...
They knew how to party.
World.
Bells would have been rung. There would have been bells, chimes, gongs, trembles, something that would be specific for whatever the ailment was that the person had, that would be brought in to bring relief as part of that. If you really want to look into this, the Tarantella is a very fascinating practice that still goes on to this day to treat people that have gotten the little spider bite. In other words, it's a way to basically cure the anxiety of youth. It is a beautiful ritual that I have gotten to take part in. It is exhausting. It is a nightmare of 16 hours of dancing to very fast drums that is practiced in southern Italy. But these are things that would have happened in these settings and in these worlds that almost always gets missed. There would be a musical component.
So a thing to think about is what type of instruments would exist in that time? Like, how would they be made? How would they be utilized? And even, oh my God, I can't remember. M.M. Ward brought up harps have been around for 4,000 years. Sometimes it's not even for a drum, a canvas stretched over log, but just a hollow log in itself.
The oldest instrument that we've ever found is a flute.
Mm-hmm.
It was 40,000 years old, and it was made out of bone.
Yes.
That's the oldest known musical instrument. It's a 40,000 year old.
For us.
So we have made music.
Speaking of that, my daughter just brought home a recorder, and I want to throw it away.
Just murder it? Yeah. Oh, that was good times. I remember when my first instrument was the recorder as well. Yeah. And then my mother got me a flutophone, so I quit playing the recorder, and it worked out great. It's so pretty. The flutophone sounds gorgeous.
And after this year's over, she can keep it. Thank you.
Oh, so lucky. Make sure she cleans it out or she'll get respiratory infections. But yeah, flutes used to be made out of bone, often human bone, because it was part of the magic of this person is still with us. They bring us their magical qualities from the other worlds, from wherever they are, or just how to bring them back to us so that they will help guide us spiritually by playing their bone.
And hunting societies around the world often made bone chimes from, depending on the size of the animal, from the clavicles or from the joints in the hands and feet that they would hang up to ring to sing the song of the animal with them while they sang their song of the animal while they were tending to procuring the various elements that they wanted from it. Because I want to be as broad as possible because it wasn't
an
just
excellent point.
But the chimes
brought up music because I totally forgot about it.
Yeah, it is one of the most forgotten things, and I watch a lot of fantasy movies and read a lot of fantasy books, and I'm like, where's all the singing?
Why don't people sing? Why don't they chant?
And again, to go back to Tolkien, there are so many songs in his books. Like, you can't go 20 pages without somebody singing a song and having all of the words in there, sometimes in multiple languages, because he liked to do that.
And also, songs were how you kept your manuals.
Yep.
Your jobs.
Yep.
Natalie, do you have a rant? Do you have something that you want to bring up about in world building with to do with food, medicine, magic, religion, anything? You good? No, you're not?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm the person soaking it in. I'm supposed to be here to to ask the dumb questions that everyone else is too afraid to, because I don't mind looking dumb. It comes naturally.
Speaking of questions, I would like to give some homework. I'm doing the talk tomorrow on magic systems, and I would prefer to just answer questions if that's possible. Mainly because, trust me, honey, I can go for days. Somebody made a mistake.
How many podcasts is it you have?
Somebody made a mistake and asked a question for the podcast, and I have it's up to 6 episodes just about magic systems.
Podcast, DJ, two weekly live streams, regular weekly video.
Yep.
Shall I go on?
Don't forget all the guest spots.
Not to mention you're actually writing through all this.
Yes, right. And I'm writing books. Yeah.
You.
Yep.
Millwordy. Yeah.
And I'm also a preacher. So anyway, yeah, I keep busy. But
this week, all I did was recover from Radathon.
Magic systems are a very interesting thing, and there's a lot of things to talk about in them. So I would much rather, instead of doing a preparation, because trust me, I can talk. Like if nobody has questions, it's not going to be dead air. I can talk about this stuff. But there's so much to talk about that I would like it if y'all could come with questions so that I can actually talk about the things that y'all are interested in. Because there's so much to talk about when it comes to magic systems. Because this may or may not be a sphere of that I'm very well versed in, and I will probably be starting a series on occultism on the podcast soon, because I kind of touched on that in the magic system talk, and that episode got double the listens of every other episode in the series. So people are apparently interested in that, because it's not something that gets talked about a lot. So I'm probably going to be talking about that. Vixens, I am going to be on, I think it's at 8 o'clock. Is that Eastern?
On 7 p.m. Eastern.
Okay, 7 p.m. Eastern.
I just looked it up because and I just typed it in.
Charlie's at 7 and Abigail's is at 1 p.m. Eastern. Because that's
those are the only 2 panels we have tomorrow.
We had talked a couple weeks ago about doing essentially at least the 3-parter of world building. So, and I have inadvertently ended up being the first of the world building, and then Abigail at 1 p.m. tomorrow, and Charlie at 7 p.m. tomorrow.
And like I said, it's just because there's so many things that could be talked about. I would like it to be actually useful for the people that are there. So please have your questions ready, so that we can drill on the topics.
I'll throw questions at you, Charlie.
Yeah, because I will be giving a link to the podcast.
Because I've been thinking about magic systems.
Yeah, because there's so much to talk about. There's so much to talk about. So,
to me, I think it's more of the questions that a writer should ask themselves when they're coming up with a magic system.
Yeah, I actually
as is it where's the source of the magic? Internal? Is it from an object? Is it from the environment?
Spoiler for the podcast, but the first question you should ask is why.
Why do you need magic?
Why do you need magic?
Way to stab me in the heart, God.
Oh, Natalie, we're doing a lot of personal introspection for you.
And just if you want to hear me talk about that for 30 minutes, go check out my podcast, Myth Weaving, because I definitely go into this for 30 minutes.
Devin's got a wrench. Put some links up. I gave Devin and Eva's got a wrench. People got wrenches.
Anchor.fm/mythweaving, and you can find links to everything there. But the biggest question that people don't ask is why they want to have a magic system. And once you answer that question, you already have the answer to what kind of magic system and how you want to write it. But you should start with the why. And be brutal with yourself, because there are too many books that just do magic for no reason.
Oh, hi, baby.
I can't even barely see them. Hold on. You can see both, right? They moved. Whatever. I give up now. I tried.
It's fine. It's good.
There was 2 down there. It was just really hard.
What I can get.
And I got the camera on the front of this thing. So it works.
And Devin, no, it wouldn't have, because my back was really hurting last night.
Yeah, what I found most interesting was having a long conversation with somebody else who's working on a magic system that wasn't ableism. So a magic system that it wasn't simply, let's get rid of all the disabled people. Because the truth is, No, a lot of people would not. You think, oh, well, blind people, they'd want to see. No, they just don't want the problems of living in a sighted world.
No.
There is a difference.
People
are happy with the way they are for the most part, but they don't want so many impediments to their own mobility, their own independence. That's it. So I hate like ableism in magic systems. It really gets my blood pressure up.
Yeah, I did. One of the things I talk about a lot is how not to be racist, sexist, or ableist in constructing a magic system, because those things happen way too often.
Yes.
Way too often. Yeah. And just because I've mentioned it a couple times, there's the link to the podcast, because I saw Devin put in a link to my books. So thank you, Devin.
Consider those questions for you got almost actually you have exactly 24 and a half hours to consider this.
Because I would
for Charlie's stream tomorrow.
Because I would like to be helpful, because like I could do a general overview, but there are a lot of good ones. If you need a general overview, go watch Tim Hicks's videos on Hello Future Me. That's the name of his channel. Really good general overviews on magic and magic systems. If we're going to be talking on a live stream, it should serve the community. So bring your questions.
Exactly. Well,
even if you're stuck in your own writing and you're like, hey, I'm stuck in this magic system, ask the question, be like, here's the rules of my magic system, but I don't know how to treat this situation. Charlie's a really good point.
Knowledge. It's time for troubleshooting. Because often, even with troubleshooting, we can then like learn so much from like the whole concept of construction of magic systems ethically. And believably, so that we don't run into a problem with readers having difficulty suspending disbelief or continuing to suspend disbelief.
Which is why Wednesday, the episode is on hard magic systems and why you shouldn't do them. Or listen to Brandon Sanderson for why you should. But
what is hard magic versus soft magic? And is it like okay to ask without putting an age restriction on this live stream?
Yes. The basic definitions there. How clear are the rules?
Okay.
A hard magic system has very hard and fast rules on how magic can be used. You're basically constructing a metaphysics that you are going to share with the readers. And so the readers understand exactly how magic can work. And the quickest way to destroy your book is to all of a sudden turn it into Moby Dick. This is where the Moby Dick conversation started the other day.
Yes.
There's so many fantasy books turn into Moby Dick where it's like, here, let me explain to you all of the in and outs of my magic system so you'll understand the last 50 pages of my book.
Yeah, I really hate the over-explaining. It's like, hey, no thanks. If you have to explain it, I want to do a story. Take me along in a story or don't take me at all.
Also, just don't ruin and make people dumb. Like, we don't need to magic away poop that you pooped in a corner.
Oh, God.
Don't get me started on She Who Shall Not Be Named.
Oh.
On that note.
Charlie, would you like to do an outro?
Actually, I think Devin did it for me. In the chat, you can see all of
darling.
Devin is awesome. My name is Charlie. I write under the name of C.E. Dorset. I have 7 books out now because I have unpublished 2 books this year because I am going to be doing new editions of them because I want to do that. And they're my books and I can do what I want to.
Amen.
You got the power.
So I have the power. I also do a lot of podcasts and such. You can, my main podcast is Project Shadow. I do a podcast on world building and writing called Myth Weaving. And I have a new podcast called House of the Blue Dragon, which is exclusive to Spotify, where I get to talk about music and we'll be interviewing some bands and such on there. Next couple episodes are going to be deep dives into Gothic dark wave music because Halloween, y'all.
Yes. Oh my
God. Trying to stay topical. So check that out if you're interested. You can find links to everything that I do over at projectshadow.com.
Natalie, got anything? Just a stranger that showed up?
Natalie Luck. I'm Natalie Luck. I post every Tuesday my double Millwordy vlog because I'm crazy. But I'm also including critique words in there. So that's why. I'll get to you in a second. Other than that, you can find me on random streams because I don't stream on a regular basis, but I totally crash everyone else's. So it's kind of like where's Waldo / where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? Where am I going to be?
I mean, you had me
finally got them
at Waldo, but you kept me at Carmen Sandiego, darling. Yeah.
I'm not sure if you saw my Rodney Dangerfield impression earlier.
It was wonderful.
It was fabulous.
It was wonderful. It was fabulous.
Was on Abby's like sprints? Okay, I will have to catch it. Yeah, I only caught the last
Abigail's,
bit.
yeah.
It looks like y'all were having such a good time.
Luckily, Charlie got it. I was afraid that not everybody would get it because
I saw that you had
I'm kind of an old soul.
That makes a lot more sense because you can't do a Rodney Dangerfield without a tie.
Low respect. Like, get absolutely no respect.
No, you can't. Oh, you know what Rodney Dangerfield said about food? A woman told him one time, she's like, "Oh, all I had today was a sandwich." He went, "Huh, what willpower?"
Oh, I feel it deep in my soul.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So, but yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
And Nikki, that's what we're going to be talking about tomorrow.
Okay, well, I am Glory. This is my channel. I hope that you have liked and subscribed if you enjoyed what we did. I hope you also check out, you will see Charlie tomorrow, but also go ahead and subscribe. And Natalie is down in the description as well. Do subscribe. Also, even if you think you've subscribed before, please check that you subscribed and ring those bells to make sure that you find out all the latest things that we're posting when we do it, because you never know. Because a lot of people have gotten de-notified and desubscribed from channels, including myself lately, from other people's stuff.
If you liked my story video, a lot more of those are coming.
Woohoo! Yes. And I'm actually working on one as well. I've got a new show with my brother, Awkward Siblings Go to the Movies, on Mondays at 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central. We're going to talk about movies and storytelling. So it's for writers, but it's also just for movie fans because, movies. What's not to love? We're going to do that through the rest of this year because we just want to keep it light and fun. So please consider coming to visit us on Mondays. And we're going to talk about Star Wars, the original trilogy, this Monday, because that is the Awkward Siblings origin story. We are only here because of A New Hope. Hello, darling babies. I'll take all the dogs. I'll take most of them.
I love that segue that you did.
Thank you. It's actually true that
siblings.
It's wonderful.
We're going to go into depth about our origin story, about how we are literally here because of one date. That our parents went to see it on their first date, went to see A New Hope, the blockbuster summer it was out, and literally got back in line and were talking so much that Dad proposed and Mom was like, I'll think about it. And a couple days later was like, you know what, he's weird, I like him, and called him up and said, did you mean it? And he's like, I meant it if you mean it. And that's how we were here. It went on from there.
I love that story. Yes. I might steal that for one of my stories.
Yeah. Oh, please feel free. Absolutely.
I might change the movie and the setup, but the premise of calling back and saying,
we were going to go, but they loved the world and they loved the idea and the world building, and it just really inspired them. Also, they just wanted to go see the movie again. So they had 4 hours in line between both times they saw it that night in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Wow.
It was a 2-hour line. It was like what we used to call a Blockbuster. It literally busted the block around the corner. It was a 2-hour line to go see the movie. And then they got back in line after they saw it the first time and kept talking about how this is the world they want to live in, where their children have options, where, on and on. And they just loved it so much that they fell in love and wanted to make babies together. It happened.
And you're welcome, MM.
Talk about other movies throughout including a love letter to Asian cinema. Starting with Big Trouble in Little China.
Welcome, chat.
So anyhow, I hope y'all will join us. Yes. Thank you so much for coming. We're so glad you're here, because if you weren't here, we'd just be three heads talking to each other, which, we'll do for free anyway.
Yeah. Pretty much.
It wouldn't stop us, but it's more enjoyable to have the chat throwing comments in.
To have the chat, it just really enriches my experience anyway.
Without the audience, it's just my Discord.
So. You check out Charlie's Discord. It's great fun. We hang out in the general chat as well as the writing room. Do come and check it out.
And talk a lot.
Now I gotta wash all this stuff off.
Right. And then Natalie, are you going to Natalie's? I mean, Natalie, I'm sorry. Why am I saying that? Are you going to Haley's, Natalie? Haley's? Are you going to Haley's?
I don't think I am on live. I'll see. I forget when the closing. I'm quite.
Can I just say for next time, I totally need to get you a jester hat because, like, I feel like we've all missed out on the best.
Yes.
Yeah, I just.
I put one on the thumbnail. It was like the little jester hat.
I like it on the thumbnail, but honestly, in COVID time, I was not about to go on Amazon.
Go out and get it. No, I get that. Let me tell you, you can tell that medieval time there was a mini ice age because darn, this thing is hot. I mean, good freaking Lord.
Good. Yay. All right.
Oh, I know. Like, seriously.
Okay, so we should probably cut the chat before, since now we're starting to derobe.
All right. Bye, everybody.